Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. This happened the night before Halloween back in 2010. At that time, I was a freshman in college, living on campus. That year, the 31st fell on a Monday, so students' festivities went on the Sunday before. Around 7 p.m., I was outside playing soccer on a field near my place, and I noticed an SUV driving by several times. I only noticed this vehicle because we kicked the ball over the fence several times, and that car was present at least twice when we were climbing the fence to get the ball. I didn't think much of it and proceeded to go to a party later that night. My girlfriend, a few friends, and I left around 9:30 p.m., and we noticed a helicopter in the sky with a bright floodlight attached to it, seemingly scanning the area. We proceeded to the party and didn't fret over it. The party was on the other side of campus, so we missed all the sirens and flashing lights racing up and down the street. We got back from the party around 11 p.m., and I immediately noticed that not only was the first helicopter still in the air around my on-campus apartment, but there was also a steady stream of police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks driving up and down the nearby street. However, none of them had their lights or sirens on, so I wasn't alarmed. The next day, the internet informed me that an SUV was found ablaze in the parking lot, with a woman's body inside. This happened about half a mile to 3/4 of a mile from where I lived. I guess during the party, the area was crawling with police and other authorities trying to look for clues. My roommate later told me that there were non-stop sirens for a good 20 minutes after I left for the party, saying that a man had killed his wife and tried to burn her body. He broke her neck as well as bludgeoning her body. If the news article I read is to be trusted, the killer was lighting his wife's body on fire around the same time I was getting dressed up in my Woody costume for a party. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I made the connection with the SUV I saw while playing soccer earlier in the day. Someone was driving within 20 yards of me with a corpse in the car, especially since it was on the campus of a seemingly secure university in a very safe city. My dad was the coolest guy on the block, probably because he was one of only 3 black dads in our town. The population was around 98% Caucasian, no exaggeration. He was a state police officer, intimidating, and he wore Oakleys before they were popular with hipsters. He was generally a rough-sounding person. Damn, do I miss him. But the one thing he feared the most was Halloween. He would tell my sister and me stories at night about his life in high school in a slum in New Jersey, where crazy things would happen every Halloween. He may have been pulling our legs a bit, but we didn't care. When Halloween rolled around, he'd take us out trick-or-treating while my mom stayed home. One Halloween night in 5th grade, Lexi and I were dressed as a witch and a 50s poodle skirt girl. Dad held our hands, walking to the last street, when I realized I'd lost Mom's scarf she'd let me borrow. She loved that scarf, so we walked all the way back toward a darker corner of our street. It was by the woods and a small stream, but when it got dark, you couldn't see anything. Dad said he saw something and walked toward it. As he got closer, he started slowing down, staring at something in the dark that we couldn't see. Lexi called out, asking if he'd found Mom's scarf, but he told her to be quiet and crouched down, looking intently into the distance. For several moments, we stood there, waiting. I could make out the scarf above his head, tied to a branch. He grabbed it, still staring into the dark, and began backing away. Then my dad screamed and sort of shuffled backward. It was a low, throaty scream, like he was furious. He was swearing too, but I don't remember what. Whatever he had been staring at bolted out of the trees and ran down the street, away from where we lived. It was a little child, probably a boy from the silhouette, dressed in a black costume with skeleton bones on the front and a skull mask. When Lexi and I tried to go over and see what had happened, Dad yelled for us to stay back. He got on his ancient cell phone and called Mom to come pick us up. His next call was to the local police. We left before we could see anything, but the next day, Mom told us about the dead, skinned animals that had been found. By the time we could go back, they had taped off the place and removed the bloody animals, but there were stains on the pavement, and the smell was terrible. The kids talked about it a bit in school, and I was curious if they ever caught the boy. Nothing came out in the local papers, though, and it was quickly forgotten. Eventually, I know my dad could have told us more, but it was the last Halloween we'd ever spend together. Halloween is my favorite holiday. Is, not was, despite the events that unfolded one crisp Halloween night when I was about 16. At the time, I lived with my parents, younger brother, older stepbrother, and cousin in a big, old house that sat in a cul-de-sac close to Main Street. Behind it ran an alleyway flanked by apartments, and it had a huge yard that my basement bedroom looked out on. We lived in a small town, where crime seemed minimal, and I went out that Halloween night to make the most of my favorite day of the year. But it wasn't just what happened that night, it was, of course, what came after, and one small incident that came before. A few days before Halloween, my stepbrother and cousin came home to find a pickup truck full of guys taking photos of our house. Weird, but when approached, the men seemed friendly and complimented our Halloween setup. It was pretty impressive, to be fair. The men sped off without incident and were quickly forgotten. Fast forward to Halloween night, or rather, about 3 a.m. Both my stepbrother and cousin had been out drinking with friends. Both had left their vehicles and braved the icy walk home on their own. My cousin arrived home first, but couldn't seem to get his key in the lock, so he just sat on the porch bench, waiting for my stepbrother to show up. He did, about half an hour later. After a bit of a laugh at my cousin for being an uncoordinated goober, he tried to unlock the door himself, and still, no luck. They finally bit the bullet and called my mom, waking her up to let them in. She, of course, was unimpressed to be opening the door for a pair of drunk idiots at this time of night and didn't buy their story about the wonky lock. They insisted, though, and to shut them up, she finally tried her key. To her surprise, she also couldn't get the key into the lock. Annoyed, tired, and now just confused, she wrote it off as a problem for tomorrow, and the three of them went to bed. One other person arrived home late that night, me. I'd actually arrived much earlier than those two and had been in bed by about midnight, but I woke up close to 1 a.m. Still exhausted, I was filled with an unsettling anxiety, though I didn't know why. At first, I tried to convince myself that I'd just gotten too into the holiday spirit and psyched myself out. But then I noticed a shadow. It was perfectly man-shaped and cast upon my window. I turned on my bedside lamp, blinked, and it was gone. It wasn't unusual, mind you, to see the shadows of people harmlessly walking through the alley, and I told myself that's all it was. Then there was what happened afterward. When I came home from school the next day, my parents were there, and so were a locksmith and the police. My parents were there, of course, because it's where they live. The locksmith was there because my mother had called him, as the lock issue from the night before was still a mystery. The police, however, had been called by my parents and the locksmith when he found the tip of a knife wedged inside our lock. I was relieved to see that's where the knife tip had ended up, as we discovered two of our window screens had been slashed, one on our garage, and one on my bedroom window. Halloween has, unfortunately, never been a big deal out here in Scotland, which has always bummed me out, because I love Halloween. But after this year, I think I'll be happy never to celebrate it again. My street and the one next to it have a lot of young kids who go out trick-or-treating, so while I was out shopping all day with my mom, we decided to pick up some sweets in case anyone came to our door. I had plans to go to the cinema to see Ouija with my boyfriend, so when I got home, I was getting myself ready to go out, and my mom was busy putting the shopping away. When the first load of kids came to the door, I was the one who had to answer it. There were children from our street, the next one over, and some I didn't recognize, along with an adult standing at the end of the path. I guessed he was either a father or an older brother based on his size, and he was dressed in all black with some sort of mask covering his face, though it wasn't anything I recognized from a movie or anything. Anyway, they all told me their jokes, I gave them their treats, and they made their way back down the path to the next house. I was about to close the door when I noticed the guy with them was still standing at the end of my path. He wasn't watching the children, he was looking right at me. My skin started to crawl as I realized he was just standing there, staring at me. I backed slowly into my house and watched as he raised his hand and gave a slow, deliberate wave. I was about to call out to him when my mom came to the door to check on me, and that's when he turned and walked away, heading in the opposite direction from the children. I suddenly realized he hadn't been with them at all, he'd just been standing there, watching me, and he'd only left once he realized I wasn't alone. I was completely freaked out and told my boyfriend all about it when he came to pick me up, but I quickly forgot the incident while we were watching the movie. I got home late, well after trick-or-treating had ended around here. My mom was just getting ready to take the dogs out for a walk so they could do their last-minute business and meet my dad on his way home from work. That meant I'd be home alone, which I was not thrilled about after what had happened earlier. Halloween always makes me uneasy when I'm alone, but tonight was especially bad. Trying to distract myself, I grabbed some snacks and went to my room to work on some writing, scroll through Tumblr, and listen to music. After my first creepy encounter with someone coming into our yard a while back, my dad had installed a motion sensor light on the wall outside my window. Normally, it goes off whenever a cat walks along the fence and shuts off after a few minutes. I know the light has come on because it lights up my whole room. As I was sitting at my computer, the light suddenly came on. I ignored it at first, figuring it would shut off soon, but 5 minutes passed, and it was still on. I opened my blinds to check what was going on, and my stomach dropped when I saw the same guy from hours earlier sitting on the fence, waving at my window to keep the light on. His hand slowed down when he spotted me, and I was flooded with the same creepy feeling all over again. Just then, I heard the front door open. My parents had come home with the dogs. I rushed downstairs, screaming about the guy on the fence. My dad didn't hesitate, he took the dogs, rushed outside, and confronted him. I heard him shouting, but when he came back, he hadn't been able to catch the guy. I begged him not to call the police, because I didn't want to relive the whole ordeal. I just wanted to go to sleep and forget the night ever happened. One evening, around dusk, my roommates, some friends, and I left to go to a party. As we walked, a group of 3 drifters or homeless people catcalled us, but we thought nothing of it and went on our way. About 4 hours later, we were heading back to our apartment to change shoes. High heels and uneven streets are hell when you've been drinking, when one of the drifters called out to me, "Hey beautiful, how about a kiss?" Being a bit drunk and feeling sassy, I replied, "No thanks. Girls are more my type." To my shock and horror, he responded, "Hey, my friend here likes the ladies." Then, out of nowhere, a homeless girl appeared and proceeded to kiss me on the mouth. My friend quickly picked me up and threw me over his shoulder. I tried to shrug it off, and we went back out. Later, I got separated from my group in the crowd, and I saw the 3 drifters again. I tried not to show my fear when they asked me where to find a liquor store. I pointed down the street to the Kroger, and they said, "Okay, you can show us." Being a small woman, I couldn't resist when they shoved me into their vehicle. At the time, I naively thought they'd actually take me to the grocery store, but it was after midnight, so it was closed. I begged them to let me out, but they kept saying, "The power does what it wants," and started driving away from the safety of the campus area, getting onto the freeway and out of the state. For the next few hours, we drove through 3 states as I pleaded for my life. I'll never forget how they kept repeating, "The power does what it wants," and talked about having fun with me. I began to resign myself to the idea that I was going to die, that I'd never graduate college or see my family again. Eventually, they pulled into a gas station, and I managed to slip out of the vehicle, only to be grabbed again. I screamed for the clerk to help. I then remembered that my family is full of police officers and told them that they were probably already looking for me. I warned them they were committing a federal crime and even said I wouldn't press charges if they took me back to campus. At that point, the girl in the group seemed to start feeling sorry for me, saying, "Guys, she's really scared. Maybe we should just drop her off somewhere. This doesn't have to get worse." Finally, they drove me back to the campus area. As soon as the girl pulled me out of the car, a police officer called my name. She shoved me toward the cop and yelled, "The power does what it wants, and tonight it let you live." I've never been so happy to sit in the back of a police cruiser. They pursued the group, but I don't know if they were ever caught. My roommate dropped out of college to join the military, and I transferred to another school. So, ladies and gentlemen, please be careful walking at night. Always keep your cell phone with you if possible, and call the police if you see suspicious people near your apartment. I had a brush with death that night, and I'm so grateful for the time I have now. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.